The moment the red wine hit my face, time slowed. I felt the liquid soak into my dress, warm and sticky, the scent of ripe berries and alcohol filling my nostrils. The gasps around the dinner table echoed like distant thunder, but no one moved. No one said a word. Then came the laughter. His laughter. "Why are you always acting like such an idiot?" My husband, James, smirked, swirling the remaining wine in his glass like he had just delivered the best punchline of the night. His friends chuckled nervously, glancing at each other, unsure whether to join in or look away. I swallowed hard. My cheeks burned, not just from the wine, but from humiliation. This was supposed to be a casual dinner with James's friends, an evening where I, Kaya, was the supportive wife, the woman who smiled in the right places, laughed at the right jokes. Instead, I had become the entertainment. I could feel all their eyes on me, waiting to see how I would react. I took a deep breath, wiped my face with my napkin, and stood up. Slow, controlled, graceful. "Excuse me," I said simply, my voice steady, giving nothing away. Then I turned on my heel and walked away, ignoring the whispers trailing behind me. Inside, my heart pounded, my hands trembled, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. I left the restaurant and drove home alone. James didn't chase after me. He was too busy reveling in his moment, playing the charming host, deflecting the uncomfortable glances of his friends with another joke. This wasn't the first time he had humiliated me in public. It had started small, belittling my ideas during conversations, making sarcastic remarks about my hobby when I spoke about my photography business. But lately, the comments had turned crueler, sharper, and now this, a public spectacle. Still, as I sat in the quiet of our dimly lit kitchen, I asked myself the same question I always did. Was it really that bad? I hated that part of me, the part that always wanted to justify his behavior, the part that told myself he didn't mean it, that he was just stressed, that maybe I had embarrassed him somehow. But tonight felt different. Tonight, something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry, not yet. The anger would come later. What I felt now was something far more dangerous. Clarity. I heard the front door open, James's footsteps echoing down the hall, slow and casual. I pictured him, tie loosened, still basking in the glow of the evening, expecting to find me sulking, maybe even crying, so he could wrap his arms around me and say something dismissive. "You know I was just joking, babe. Don't be so sensitive. You embarrassed yourself more by overreacting." I had heard it all before, but tonight there would be no argument, no begging for an apology he wouldn't mean, no second chances. He stepped into the kitchen and saw me sitting at the table, my laptop open, a pen in my hand, writing something down in my notebook. His smile faded. "What are you doing?" he asked. I looked up at him, my face calm. "Making a list," I said, his brows furrowed. "A list of what?" I closed the notebook softly. "Of everything you've ever done to me." He laughed, an uneasy chuckle, the confidence in his voice slipping. "Oh, come on, Kaya, don't be dramatic." I didn't answer. Instead, I reached for my phone and pulled up a video. I turned the screen toward him. It was the dinner party. Someone had recorded it, and now, so had I. James's smirk twitched as he stared at the phone screen, the dim glow reflecting off his face. His hand tensed around the edge of the counter, his confident posture suddenly uncertain. "What is this?" he asked, his voice lower now. "Exactly what it looks like." On the screen, the video played, his voice clear, his laughter sharp, the splash of red wine staining my dress, the way I had simply wiped my face and walked away, and the reaction of his friends, some amused, others visibly uncomfortable. "Someone recorded it," I said, locking eyes with him. "They thought I should have a copy." I saw the flicker of fear behind his annoyance. James was a man who thrived on reputation. He had built his career on charm, on being the guy everyone liked. He wasn't the smartest or the most hardworking, but he was the one people wanted to have drinks with. The one who made jokes at just the right moments. But this was different. "Delete it," he said, his voice turning firm. "Right now." I tilted my head. "Why? It's just a joke, isn't it?" His jaw tightened. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "You're overreacting, Kaya. Nobody cares about stupid things like this." "It was just a joke," I finished for him. "Tell me, James, if I had done the same to you, would it still be funny?" His lips pressed into a thin line. Of course not. If the roles had been reversed, if I had humiliated him in front of my friends, thrown a drink in his face, and laughed at his expense, he would have stormed out. He would have called me unstable, embarrassing, ridiculous. But James had spent years convincing me that his words were always just jokes, while my feelings were overreactions. Not anymore. "Kaya, come on." He forced a laugh, but I could see the cracks forming in his facade. "What are you trying to do here? Punish me? You're being ridiculous." I stood up slowly, picking up my notebook and flipping through the pages. "Do you know what this is?" I asked, tapping my fingers against the worn paper. James scoffed. "A diary of every time I pissed you off?" "Close," I said. "It's a record of every insult, every lie, every time you've made me feel small." I held his gaze. "I've been keeping track, James, and guess what? There's a pattern." His expression flickered between amusement and irritation. "You need to stop watching those dramatic self-help videos, Kaya. This is insane." "Is it?" I asked, stepping closer. "Because it wasn't insane when I sat quietly and let you treat me like an accessory to your life. It wasn't insane when you made me feel like I was lucky to have you, instead of the other way around." I saw it then, the moment it truly hit him. I wasn't just upset. I was done. James exhaled, shaking his head. "Fine, you're mad, I get it. So what now? You hold this video over my head forever?" I said I was sorry, he added. "You haven't actually apologized yet." "Jesus, Kaya, fine, I'm sorry, okay? I shouldn't have done it. Can we move on now?" There it was. Not real remorse, just irritation that I wasn't brushing it off like I always had. Moving on. I let the words roll over my tongue, as if I was testing them. James's body relaxed slightly. "Good. That's all I'm asking." "Oh no," I corrected. "I meant me moving on, not us." His head snapped up. "What?" "I called a lawyer today." I let the words settle between us. He blinked like I had spoken in a language he didn't understand. "You're not serious." I held up my phone again, this time showing a different screen, a list of legal consultation appointments. "Very serious." His laugh was hollow. "You're overreacting, Kaya. You're not actually going to throw our marriage away over this." "Our marriage?" I arched a brow. "The one where you insult me in public? The one where you make me feel like I'm nothing?" I shook my head. "James, I didn't ruin our marriage." "You did. I just finally decided to stop pretending otherwise." James ran a hand over his face, pacing the kitchen. He muttered something under his breath before turning back to me. "What do you want, huh?" His voice turned sharp. "Do you want me to get on my knees and beg? Is that what this is?" "I don't want anything from you, James," I said simply. "That's the point." He laughed again, but there was nothing amused about it. "You're being dramatic. You won't actually go through with this." I just smiled. "Wait and see." I turned to leave, but before I reached the hallway, I glanced over my shoulder one last time. "Oh, and James," I said lightly. "I'd think twice before laughing this off in front of your friends. You never know who else has a copy of that video." I didn't wait for his response. For the first time in years, I didn't care what he had to say. I just walked away. James didn't chase after me. Not right away. That wasn't his style. He liked to win, to manipulate, to wear me down with charm or, if necessary, with guilt. He was probably telling himself that I'd cool off, that I'd wake up in the morning and regret everything. He was wrong. I barely slept that night, but not because I was second-guessing myself. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. My mind was still buzzing, my heart still raw, but beneath it all was clarity, a quiet, resolute certainty. I was leaving him, and this time, I wouldn't let him talk me out of it. By the time I stepped into the kitchen the next morning, James was already there, leaning against the counter with a cup of coffee in hand. He looked at me like he was waiting for something. An apology, maybe. A sign that I was ready to talk this through. I gave him nothing. So he finally said, setting his mug down, "You had your little moment. You're feeling better now?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. "I'm not having a moment, James." "Right." He let out a scoff. "You're still sticking with this ridiculous divorce talk, huh?" I turned away from him, opening the cabinet to grab my own mug. I wasn't going to engage in his game. That was what he wanted, to turn this into a fight he could win, to push my buttons until I exploded so he could twist it into me being the irrational one. When I didn't answer, his tone shifted. "Kaya, come on. We've been married for 8 years. You're seriously going to throw all of that away over one stupid night?" I turned to face him, my expression unreadable. "I'm not throwing anything away, James. You did that a long time ago. I'm just finally ready to admit it." I watched his face carefully, and for the first time I saw it. The fear. It was just a flicker, quickly masked by irritation, but it was there. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said, his voice sharper now. "You think anyone actually cares about that video? My friends were laughing, Kaya. Nobody's taking this as seriously as you are." I leaned against the counter, tilting my head. "You sure about that?" I pulled out my phone, scrolling for a second before holding the screen up to him. "What's this?" he asked, frowning. "Check the comment section, James." The video, the one his friend had recorded, had been shared in their private group chat, the same one they used to share sports bets, inside jokes, and workplace gossip. Only this time, the messages weren't what he expected. Man, that was rough to watch. Dude, I don't think that was funny at all. Kind of messed up. Is Kaya okay? James's eyes darted over the screen, his grip on the phone tightening. "Why are you showing me this?" he snapped. "Because you seem to think your friends found it funny. Turns out, not everyone agrees." I could see the muscles in his jaw clench, his hands balling into fists at his sides. James hated looking bad. He cared about perception more than anything else, about being liked, about being admired. And now, for the first time, he was realizing that maybe, just maybe, people weren't laughing with him. They were laughing at him. "Okay, fine," he said, his voice low. "You made your point. You embarrassed me. Congratulations. Now delete the damn video, Kaya." I took a slow sip of my coffee, my heartbeat steady. "No." His face darkened. "Excuse me?" "I'm not deleting it, James, and I'm not staying with you." He let out a humorless laugh, shaking his head. "You think you're the only one who can play games? You want to go through with this? Fine, but don't think for a second I'm just going to roll over and let you take everything." There it was. The real James, the charming husband, the one who cracked jokes and played the role of the good guy. That was just a mask. Beneath it, he was exactly what I had always feared he was. A man who needed control. "I built this life too," he continued, stepping closer. "You think you can just walk away and leave me with nothing? You'd better think twice, sweetheart." I stared up at him, refusing to let him see the flicker of unease in my chest. "You're right, James," I said softly. "You did build this life, and I hope you enjoy it, because by the time I'm done, it's all you'll have left." He frowned. "What the hell does that mean?" I set my coffee down, picked up my bag, and walked toward the door. Before stepping out, I turned back just long enough to deliver the final blow. "By the way," I said over my shoulder, "you might want to check your bank account." And then I left, leaving him standing there, confusion and anger written all over his face. The first sign that James was unraveling came just 2 hours later. I was sitting in a quiet cafe, sipping a latte, when my phone buzzed on the table. I didn't have to look to know who it was. James. What the hell did you do? I took my time finishing my sip before unlocking my phone. Kaya, answer me now. I set the phone down and smiled. I wasn't going to respond. Not yet. Let him sweat. I already knew what he was discovering. Last week, when I first started considering leaving, I had moved half of our shared savings into a separate account under my name. Legally, I was entitled to it. I had earned just as much as he had. The difference was I had been smart enough to prepare. I had also removed myself as a co-signer on his credit card and frozen our joint account. If he wanted money, he would have to rely on his own. And that was a problem for James, because James wasn't good with his own money. He lived like a king on payday and complained like a pauper by the end of the month. Expensive nights out, overpriced gadgets, status symbol purchases to impress his friends. It had all drained him faster than he realized. Now he had to face the consequences. I checked my phone again. Kaya, you took our money? Are you insane? Kaya, I swear to God, fix this now. I exhaled slowly, the satisfaction settling deep in my bones. It was our money when I took half. But when he spent thousands on nonsense, that was his right. Typical. The next blow landed harder than the first. I didn't have to wait long to hear about it. That afternoon, my friend Lily called, her voice practically vibrating through the phone. Kaya, please tell me you've seen it. Seen what? I asked, even though I already had a feeling. The post. I opened the group chat Lily and I shared with a few mutual friends. The moment I saw the screenshot, my breath caught. James's boss had posted something, not naming names, but it was obvious who it was, about a man who can't respect his wife in private won't respect anyone in business either. Actions have consequences. James's boss had been at that dinner party, and apparently he hadn't laughed. Comments flooded in, subtle but telling. Wow, people really show their true colors sometimes. Humiliating your own wife in public? Yikes. Glad I know who not to work with. James had built his career on being likable. He wasn't the best at what he did, but he knew people. He charmed them, made them laugh, convinced them he was the guy to invite for drinks after work. But that charm was cracking now, because when you expose someone for who they really are, the people who once admired them start seeing the truth. And James, he was being exposed. I was still scrolling through the fallout when my phone rang. James. I let it ring, then a voicemail. I put in my earbuds and pressed play. Kaya, what the hell is going on? My boss won't return my calls. People are treating me like I'm some kind of monster because of you. His voice was shaking, anger barely contained. This is beyond petty. This is cruel. You're ruining my life over a damn joke. A pause. Then, quieter, almost desperate. Come on, babe, I didn't mean it like that. You know that. I closed my eyes. I knew that tone well. The shift from rage to pity, from anger to guilt-tripping. He was grasping, trying to pull me back into the cycle. But I wasn't falling for it. Not this time. By evening, James had gone from demanding to bargaining. Another message. Let's talk. Just us. No fighting, please. I stared at the words for a moment before typing back. Fine. Meet me at the house in an hour. Then I picked up my bag and headed out. When I arrived, James was already there, pacing. He turned sharply when I walked in. Okay. He exhaled. Let's be adults about this. Let's talk like normal people. I folded my arms. Go ahead. Look, I was an ass, I admit that. He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. I was drunk. It was a stupid joke, but I didn't mean to hurt you. I raised an eyebrow. You weren't drunk, James. You had half a glass of wine. His jaw twitched. Fine, whatever. The point is I messed up, but you're going nuclear here. You're cutting off the accounts, turning people against me. What do you want? Revenge? I sighed, tilting my head. No, James. I just want to be done. His expression darkened. So that's it? You're walking away? Just like that? Just like that. For a second, he looked lost, as if it was only now sinking in that he wasn't winning this one. What am I supposed to do, Kaya? I shrugged. Figure it out. You always told me I was the problem. Now you get to see what life is like without me. His face hardened. You're going to regret this. I smiled faintly. No, James. You are. I turned and walked toward the door, feeling the weight of years fall from my shoulders. Before I stepped outside, I spoke one last time, not bothering to look back. Oh, and by the way, you might want to check your email. Then I left, leaving James standing alone in the house he once controlled, with the storm he never saw coming about to hit him full force. James wasn't ready for what was coming next. I could picture it perfectly. The way his face would twist as he opened his email, skimming the words, rereading them in disbelief. The way he'd rush to his laptop, typing frantically, hoping that what he was seeing wasn't real. But it was. By the time I got back to my apartment, the one I had quietly leased 2 months ago when I first started planning my escape, my phone was already buzzing. James. I ignored it. Another call, then another. By the time he left the voicemail, I was already pouring myself a glass of wine, settling into my new life with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. But still, I pressed play. Kaya, you... His voice cracked with anger. You're out of your damn mind. What the hell did you do? I took a slow sip of wine. Let's see how he handled this. The email I had sent wasn't to him. It was to his company's HR department. Attached was the video from the dinner party. A clear, undeniable display of verbal and emotional abuse. In public, no less. I didn't have to say much. Just a simple professional message. I am reaching out to formally report my soon-to-be ex-husband, James Carter, for repeated patterns of verbal and emotional abuse, as demonstrated in the attached footage. This is only one instance, but it reflects an ongoing issue that has impacted both his personal and professional reputation. Given your company's values, I felt it was important that this behavior be acknowledged. I knew exactly what I was doing. James worked for a company that prided itself on corporate ethics and leadership accountability. They hosted workshops on workplace respect, diversity, and inclusion. Their HR department took PR scandals very seriously, and now they had evidence of one of their own employees humiliating his wife in public. He wouldn't be able to talk his way out of this one. My phone rang again. This time I answered. Kaya. His voice was frantic, stripped of the confidence he always carried. I stayed silent. You sent that email? Are you serious? Do you have any idea what you've done? I know exactly what I've done, I said calmly. I made sure they saw you for who you really are. God, Kaya, this is my career. What the hell is wrong with you? I exhaled, leaning back in my chair. Oh, now it matters? Now you care about consequences? Funny, because when I was sitting there, drenched in wine, listening to you laugh, you didn't seem too concerned about my reputation. That was different. No, I interrupted. It wasn't. His breath came in sharp and uneven, his frustration barely contained. Look, we don't have to do this. You're mad, I get it, but we can fix this. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you were overreacting. We can make this go away. I almost laughed. Even now, he thought I could be persuaded, that I could be managed. You still don't get it, do you? I said softly. I don't want to fix this, James. I want you to feel what it's like to lose everything. Silence, then a quiet, strained whisper. You're really doing this? I already did. The fallout was swift. By the next morning, James's boss had called him in for an urgent meeting. By the afternoon, he was suspended, pending an internal review. And by the end of the week, the company announced his termination. He tried to fight it, tried to argue that it was unfair, that it was a private matter, that his wife was just vindictive. But the video spoke louder than his words ever could. And it wasn't just his job he lost. His reputation collapsed. Clients pulled out of projects. Colleagues distanced themselves. Friends stopped returning his calls. It wasn't just about the dinner party anymore. People started remembering all the other things, the offhanded sexist comments, the way he always dismissed women in meetings, the microaggressions. His world wasn't falling apart. It was revealing itself for what it always was. And without his power, his charm, his connections, James was nothing. A week after his termination, James showed up at my apartment. I almost didn't answer, but I wanted to see him, to look him in the eye one last time. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. His once pristine suit was wrinkled, his confidence gone, replaced with something hollow and desperate. "Kaya," he said, his voice softer now. "Can we talk?" I studied him for a long moment. "Talk," I repeated. "Like we always did, where you talk and I sit there and take it." He let out a breath, shaking his head. "I messed up, okay? I get that. But this is too much." "Too much?" I tilted my head. "You mean like throwing a drink in my face in front of an audience? Like laughing at me while I sat there humiliated? Like treating me like I was less than for years?" He swallowed hard. "I just need some time to fix things," he murmured. I need your help." I almost pitied him. Almost. "You always needed my help, James. You just never wanted to admit it." He looked down, rubbing the back of his neck. "I guess I just thought you'd always be there." I exhaled slowly. "Yeah," I said. "So did I." I closed the door in his face, and this time I didn't look back. The door clicked shut, sealing James out of my life for good. I leaned against it for a moment, exhaling slowly, letting the silence settle. No more manipulation, no more mind games, no more waiting for an apology that would never come. For the first time in years, I was free, and I had never felt lighter. I didn't have to check up on James to know what happened next. The whispers started almost immediately. His fall from grace had been public, and the people who once admired him now avoided him. He tried to land another job in the same field, but word had spread. His reputation was stained, and in an industry built on relationships, he had burned too many bridges. He wasn't just out of work. He was out of power. The same friends who used to laugh at his jokes suddenly weren't returning his calls. His savings, what little was left, was draining fast. He tried to fight the divorce settlement, but with the evidence I had collected, his lawyer practically begged him to settle quietly. He lost the house, he lost the respect of his peers, and eventually he lost himself. Lily texted me once, saying she had seen him at a bar, alone, looking small, looking unimportant. I didn't reply. I didn't need to because I didn't care. My life, on the other hand, flourished. The apartment I had moved into wasn't temporary, it was a fresh start. I decorated it exactly how I wanted. Bright, warm, no traces of James's cold, modern aesthetic. And my business thrived. Without James belittling me, without him making me question my worth, I poured everything into it. I expanded, I hired more people, and for the first time in a long time, I realized just how much I had been holding myself back when I was with him. People started reaching out, not because of what had happened with James, but because of what I had done afterward. "You're an inspiration," one woman wrote. "I watched your story unfold and it gave me the courage to leave my own toxic marriage." Others followed, stories of women who had once felt trapped, just like I had. And that's when I realized something. My revenge hadn't been about destroying James. It had been about rebuilding myself. 6 months after I closed the door in his face, I saw James again. It wasn't planned. I was at a networking event, laughing with new business contacts, when I spotted him across the room. He wasn't dressed in the crisp suits he used to wear. His tie was slightly loose, his confidence muted, and he was alone. I didn't approach him. I didn't need to. But he saw me. And in that moment, I watched something shift in his expression. Regret, not because he had lost me, but because he had never truly seen me until it was too late. For a second, I almost expected him to walk over, to try one last time. But he didn't, because he knew I had won. That night, I went home to my apartment, the one filled with laughter, with warmth, with peace. I poured a glass of wine, sat by the window, and exhaled. This time, I wasn't drowning in red wine and humiliation. I was celebrating. Not revenge, not victory, but freedom. James had thought that throwing that wine in my face was the punchline to some cruel joke, but he had been wrong. It wasn't the end of my story. It was only the beginning. Looking back, I, Kaya, learned that my worth was never tied to James or his approval. His cruelty, that wine thrown in my face, wasn't just a moment of humiliation. It was a mirror showing me how much I'd dimmed my own light to fit into his world. I spent years excusing his behavior, convincing myself it wasn't that bad. But that night, clarity hit. Love doesn't belittle, and strength isn't staying silent. Leaving him wasn't just about escaping pain. It was about reclaiming my voice, my value, my life. I learned that freedom comes from choosing yourself, even when it's terrifying, even when it means walking away from everything familiar. Every step I took, moving money, sending that email, building my business, was a brick in the foundation of a new me. I didn't just survive James. I thrived because I stopped waiting for his permission to shine. The greatest lesson? You don't need to destroy someone else to rise. You just need to stop letting them define you. That glass of wine wasn't the end of my story. It was the spark that set me free. The knock shattered my morning peace, sharp and demanding, the kind that doesn't ask for permission. I wasn't ready for visitors, not after the exhausting week I'd survived, not after everything Derek had put me through. Setting down my coffee mug, I wiped my hands across my robe and moved toward the door, forcing myself to breathe slowly. Nothing could have prepared me for what waited on the other side. There she stood, Megan, Derek's new girlfriend, the woman he'd chosen over 12 years of marriage, the one he'd paraded around town while I picked up the fragments of my shattered life. She was smiling, that smug, victorious smile that made my stomach turn. Before I could even process her presence, she spoke, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "You should start packing, Claire," she announced, tilting her head like she'd already won. "We're moving in." She held up folded papers, waving them like a trophy. "Derek didn't mention this to you?" Her grin widened. "This house belongs to him now, so if I were you, I'd start boxing up your things because we're taking over." A cold sensation crept through my chest, but instead of panic, I felt something sharper, something calmer. I let my lips curve into a smile because I knew something she didn't. Behind her, just beyond her line of sight, stood Mr. Thompson, my lawyer, and the real game was about to begin. It had started months ago, or perhaps if I'm being completely honest with myself, it had been building for years. Derek and I had been married for 12 years, and for most of that time, I had been the one holding everything together. The one who managed the finances, the one who made sure the mortgage was paid on time, the one who put in the effort when Derek started pulling away. I had ignored the warning signs at first because that's what you do when you love someone, when you believe in the vows you took. The late nights at the office became more frequent. His phone never left his hand anymore, and I'd catch him whispering into it in other rooms, his voice low and secretive. I told myself it was work stress, that he was dealing with something difficult, that our marriage was just going through a rough patch like every marriage does. But then I saw them together, and everything changed in an instant. It was supposed to be a relaxing evening, a girls' night out that my friend had organized to help me escape the tension suffocating our home. I had been looking forward to it, desperate for a break from the stress of trying to hold on to a marriage that was slipping through my fingers. We walked into the restaurant, laughing about something trivial, and then I saw him. Derek was sitting in a corner booth, his hand resting on hers, laughing in a way I hadn't seen in years, his eyes bright with something I no longer recognized. She was younger, prettier in that effortless way some women are, and the way he looked at her told me everything I needed to know. My friend grabbed my arm, asking if I was okay, but I couldn't speak because something inside me had just snapped. Not with rage, but with cold, calculated clarity. I didn't confront him that night because I knew better. I knew that anger would only give him the upper hand, that tears would make him feel justified in his betrayal. Instead, I went home, poured myself a glass of wine, and started planning because if Derek thought he could humiliate me, if he thought he could take what was mine and walk away unscathed, he had severely underestimated me. The house had always been mine, long before Derek ever entered my life. My grandmother had left it to me in her will, a beautiful 2-story home with hardwood floors and a garden I had spent years cultivating. When Derek and I got married, he had asked multiple times to add his name to the deed, always with some reasonable excuse about making things easier, about us being a team. But something in my gut had told me to keep it separate, to protect this one thing that was truly mine. He had laughed it off at first, making jokes about me not trusting him, but over time his requests became more insistent, more frustrated. "Why does it matter?" he would say, his tone edged with irritation. "We're married. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine." Except in Derek's world, that philosophy only worked one way. What was mine was his, and what was his remained untouchable. I had watched him over the years, the way he'd casually drain our joint account for his hobbies, his lunches, his secret purchases, but hesitate when it came to contributing anything of his own. I had ignored it then, convincing myself that marriage was about compromise, about trust, about giving someone the benefit of the doubt. I had trusted him completely, and he had counted on me being too heartbroken, too emotionally destroyed by his affair to fight back when the time came. But what Derek didn't know, what neither of them could have possibly known, was that I had been fighting back since the moment I saw him with her. I had quietly gathered every financial document, every receipt, every piece of evidence that showed exactly what Derek had been doing with our money. I had met with Mr. Thompson multiple times, reviewing every legal option, making sure that when the time came, I would be protected. Derek had filed for divorce, assuming he'd walk away with half of everything, assuming the house would be split between us, assuming I'd be too broken to challenge him. He had even tried to file fraudulent paperwork claiming ownership of the property, thinking I'd never notice, thinking I'd be too devastated to care. He had moved Megan into a temporary apartment, promising her they'd soon be living in a beautiful house, my house, starting their new life together while I was left with nothing. I knew all of this because Derek had never been good at covering his tracks. He'd always been arrogant, always assumed he was the smartest person in the room. And that arrogance, that absolute certainty that he had won, was exactly what I had been counting on. So when Megan showed up at my door that morning with her fake deed and her smug smile, ready to claim her prize, I knew exactly what was coming next. And I was ready. Megan's confident smile began to falter as Mr. Thompson stepped forward, his presence finally registering in her mind. The arrogance she had walked in with, that absolute certainty that she had already won, started to crack around the edges. What is this?" she stammered, her voice not quite as steady as it had been moments ago. I took my time responding, letting the silence stretch between us, watching as doubt began to creep into her expression. "You seem incredibly sure of yourself, Megan," I said slowly, tilting my head as I studied her reaction. "Like you think you already own this house, like you and Derek have somehow outsmarted me." Her fingers tightened around the papers she was holding, her posture shifting defensively as she tried to hold on to her conviction. "Derek transferred ownership to himself," she snapped, holding up the document as if it were irrefutable proof. "He told me you didn't have any choice in the matter. This house is his now. We checked everything." I smiled again, letting the question hang in the air. "Did you?" I glanced at Mr. Thompson, who had remained silent this entire time, calmly organizing the folder in his hands. He adjusted his glasses, his expression completely neutral, professional, and unreadable. "Mrs. Harrison," he said, addressing me formally while completely ignoring Megan's presence. "Would you prefer to explain the situation, or shall I handle it?" I turned back to Megan, taking in every detail of her reaction, the way her confidence was finally beginning to waver under the weight of uncertainty. "Go ahead," I told him, keeping my voice calm and measured. I think she deserves to hear this from a professional. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat and directed his attention to Megan, who was now gripping those papers like they were the only thing keeping her afloat. "You see, Miss Megan," he began, his tone patient but with an edge of amusement. The house was never Derek's property to transfer. Silence filled the room as his words sank in. Megan blinked rapidly, her mouth opening but no sound coming out. "What?" she finally managed to whisper. My lawyer continued, his voice steady and deliberate. "This house," he gestured around the room we were standing in, "was never registered in Derek's name. Not before the marriage, not during the marriage, and certainly not during any divorce proceedings." Megan's face went pale, but she recovered quickly, shaking her head in denial as if refusing to accept what she was hearing. "That's impossible," she scoffed. "Derek told me everything was handled. He said the lawyers worked it all out. He said this house was his." "Derek lied," I cut in, my voice sharp and clear. She turned to look at me, her eyes wide with confusion and the first hints of real panic. I walked over to the side table near the entrance and picked up a different set of documents. The real ones, the ones that actually mattered. I held them up between my fingers, letting her see the official seals, the legal stamps, the notarized signatures. "This house was mine before I ever met Derek," I explained, my tone even and controlled. "It was left to me in my grandmother's will when I was 23 years old. I never added Derek's name to the deed, no matter how many times he asked, no matter how much he pressured me. He had absolutely no legal claim to this property during our marriage, and he certainly doesn't have any claim to it now." Megan's lips parted, but she still couldn't form words, couldn't process what she was hearing. I took a step closer, watching as the reality of the situation finally began to break through her denial. "Whatever paperwork Derek gave you, whatever promises he made about your future together, it's completely worthless." The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating, and then I saw it happen. The exact moment when the truth hit her. I watched her face transform from confusion to understanding, then to doubt, and finally to pure panic. Derek had always underestimated me, had always assumed I'd be too emotional, too heartbroken, too weak to stand up for myself. I remembered how he used to dismiss my concerns, how he'd laugh when I insisted on keeping certain assets separate. "Why does it even matter?" he'd say with that condescending tone. "We're supposed to be partners, Claire. Why don't you trust me?" But I had seen the truth long before he left, had seen the way he carefully protected what was his while assuming everything I owned was fair game. I had trusted him with my heart, with 12 years of my life, but I had never trusted him with my future, and that decision had just saved me from complete destruction. Megan took a shaky breath, trying to compose herself, trying to salvage some dignity from this nightmare. "Derek said the house was his," she repeated, but this time it sounded more like she was trying to convince herself than me. "He said he had it all worked out with the lawyers. He promised we could move in and start fresh." Mr. Thompson sighed, closing his folder with a soft snap. "He worked nothing out," he stated bluntly. "What Derek actually did was attempt to file fraudulent ownership documents, which is exactly what you're currently holding." Megan's grip on those papers loosened, her hands beginning to tremble. I crossed my arms and waited, letting the silence do the rest of the work for me, watching as she processed the magnitude of Derek's deception. And then, right on cue, she snapped. "That lying bastard," she muttered under her breath, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and humiliation. I raised an eyebrow, unable to suppress a small smile. "Is something wrong, Megan?" She turned toward me so quickly I almost laughed at the fury blazing in her eyes. "He told me this was his house," she said, her voice rising with each word. "He said he was kicking you out. He said we could move in together and build our life here. He promised me everything." I tilted my head slightly, studying her with detached curiosity. "And you believed him?" Her eyes flashed dangerously, but she didn't respond because she knew I was right. I could see the wheels turning in her head now, the slow, painful realization creeping in. If Derek had lied about something this massive, what else had he lied about? What other promises were built on nothing but deception? Megan's hands were shaking violently as she grabbed her phone, her perfectly manicured nails tapping frantically against the screen as she scrolled through her contacts. I stood back and watched with detached amusement as she found Derek's name, her breathing coming in short, angry bursts. She was unraveling right in front of me, the confidence she'd walked in with completely shattered. Just minutes ago, she had stood in my doorway like a conqueror, certain she was about to claim her prize, and now she was scrambling to understand how badly she'd been deceived. I leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing my arms, fully prepared to enjoy what came next. She hit dial, and the phone rang twice before Derek's voice came through the speaker, confident and casual, completely oblivious to the storm about to hit him. "Hey babe, what's up?" he said, his tone so relaxed it was almost comical. Megan didn't waste a single second. "You lying piece of garbage," she screamed into the phone, her voice rising with every syllable. "You told me the house was yours, that we were moving in, that you had thrown Claire out." There was a long pause, and I could practically hear Derek's brain trying to catch up with what was happening. What are you talking about?" he finally managed, his voice tinged with confusion. Megan spun toward me, her eyes blazing with fury and humiliation. "Tell him," she demanded. I smirked and picked up my coffee mug, taking a slow, deliberate sip before setting it back down. "Hey, Derek," I said smoothly, my voice dripping with satisfaction. "Interesting morning we're having, wouldn't you say?" Another pause, longer this time, and when his voice returned, it had lost all its confidence. "What's going on?" he asked, and I could hear the first hints of panic creeping in. Megan's grip on her phone tightened until her knuckles turned white. "I'll tell you exactly what's going on," she hissed. "I just showed up at Claire's house, ready to move in like you promised, and guess what, Derek?" She turned back toward me, her expression a mixture of rage and disbelief. "Claire still owns the house, she owns everything, and you lied to me about all of it." I could almost hear Derek's stomach drop through the phone. That's not possible," he stammered, his words tumbling over each other. "I filed all the paperwork, I took care of everything." Megan cut him off before he could continue. "You filed? Nothing," she shouted. "You lied to me, you told me we were starting fresh, you said you had taken care of everything in the divorce." Derek's breathing grew heavier, more labored, and I knew he was finally realizing that his carefully constructed plan had just collapsed around him. "You don't understand," he said quickly, desperation bleeding into his voice. "I was going to fix it. I had a plan." Megan let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "Fix it? You told me we had nothing to worry about. You told me you got everything in the settlement." I raised an eyebrow at that statement, unable to resist interjecting. "Everything?" I said, my voice calm but cutting. "Oh, Derek, you really are delusional. Let me clarify something for Megan here. You didn't get the house, you didn't get any stake in my business, and you certainly didn't get access to the joint account you tried to drain. The only thing you walked away with was your car." Megan turned back to the phone, and I watched as the reality continued to sink in. "And that car?" she said slowly, her voice shaking. "Is what, a 10-year-old sedan that barely runs?" Derek was silent, completely silent, and that silence said everything. Megan closed her eyes and let out another bitter laugh, this one edged with something darker, something that sounded like genuine despair. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You really have nothing. We have nothing." I watched her carefully as she paced across my living room floor, still gripping that phone like it was the only solid thing left in her world. "I left everything for you, Derek," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "I believed in you. I trusted every word you said." Derek was still scrambling on the other end, still trying desperately to regain control of the situation. "Baby, listen to me," he started, but she cut him off immediately. "Don't you dare call me baby," she snapped. "You told me we'd be living in a beautiful house. You told me we'd be set for life, and now you're telling me you have absolutely nothing? That we have nothing?" She was unraveling completely now, and I wasn't about to stop her because this was exactly what Derek deserved. His voice grew more desperate, more frantic. "Megan, come on. We're in this together. We can figure it out." Megan let out another sharp, humorless laugh. "No, Derek," she said coldly. "You dragged me into this disaster. I didn't sign up to be broke and homeless with you." She suddenly turned toward me, her eyes wild and accusatory. "You planned this," she said, pointing at me with her free hand. "You wanted me to find out like this? You wanted to humiliate me." I shrugged, completely unbothered by her accusation. "I didn't force you to show up at my house uninvited, Megan," I replied evenly. "That was entirely your choice, yours and Derek's." Her lips parted, then snapped shut because she knew I was right. She had no argument against the truth. The reality of the situation was finally sinking in completely now. Derek had used her, manipulated her, played her, just like he'd tried to play me, and now she was paying the price for believing his lies. Megan turned back to the phone, her entire body trembling with a mixture of rage and humiliation. "I should have known," she said through gritted teeth. "You didn't love me. You just needed someone stupid enough to go along with your pathetic fantasy." Derek's voice was pure panic now. "Megan, please, we can talk about this." Click. She hung up without another word, cutting him off mid-sentence. Then she turned to face me, and for a long moment we just stood there in silence. Two women who had both been fooled by the same man. Her face was a complicated mixture of emotions, humiliation, rage, regret, and something else I recognized all too well, the crushing weight of realizing you'd thrown away everything for someone who never deserved it in the first place. And then, to my complete surprise, she laughed, a short, bitter sound that held no humor whatsoever. "I can't believe I fell for him," she said quietly, shaking her head. I didn't respond because there was nothing I could say that would make this moment any easier for her. She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair, and then without another word, she turned and walked toward the door. I watched her leave, wondering briefly what would become of her now. Whether she'd run back to Derek and try to salvage whatever scraps remained, or whether she'd finally do the smart thing and cut her losses completely. Either way, it didn't matter to me anymore because the one thing I knew with absolute certainty was this: Derek had lost everything, and for the first time in a very long time, I had won. Megan's footsteps echoed down my driveway as she stormed away, phone still clutched in her shaking hand, her entire world having collapsed in the span of 20 minutes. She had arrived here thinking she was stepping into her new life, and instead she had walked straight into the most humiliating reality check of her existence. I didn't call after her, didn't feel even a shred of sympathy because she had made her choices and now she had to live with the consequences. I turned back to Mr. Thompson, who was still standing in my living room, calmly organizing his notes as if we hadn't just witnessed a complete emotional breakdown. "Well," he said finally, looking up at me with the hint of a smile. "That was certainly entertaining." I let out a small laugh, shaking my head slowly. "She really thought she'd won," I murmured. She genuinely believed she had everything figured out. My lawyer closed his folder with a satisfying snap. "That's what happens when people put their faith in the wrong person," he replied. And with that simple statement, I closed the door, literally and figuratively, locking out the past for good. I had barely finished my now cold coffee when my phone buzzed on the counter. Derek. I stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether answering was even worth my time. Part of me wanted to ignore him, completely, but another part of me wanted to hear the desperation in his voice one final time. Curiosity won. I picked up the phone, keeping my voice perfectly steady. "What do you want, Derek?" His breathing was uneven on the other end, ragged with frustration and barely contained panic. "Claire, whatever you told Megan, you need to fix it right now," he said, his words tumbling over each other. "She just called me screaming, saying I ruined her entire life." I smirked, swirling the remnants of my coffee slowly. "Derek, you did that completely on your own," I replied calmly. "I didn't make you lie to her." Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Then his tone shifted, became almost pleading. "Listen," he said. "Let's just talk about this like adults. We were married for 12 years, Claire. You can't just throw me away like I'm nothing." I almost laughed at the sheer audacity. "Oh, but you could throw me away?" I asked, my voice turning cold. "You could walk out, drain our accounts, move on with your younger girlfriend, and expect me to just accept it quietly?" "That's different," he snapped defensively. "I made mistakes, okay?" But I was hurt too. We weren't happy. I let his words hang in the air for a moment, then asked the question I already knew the answer to. Are you happy now, Derek? More silence. As much as I wanted to hang up and never hear his voice again, I had one final piece of information to deliver. By the way, Derek, I said, keeping my tone light, I received a call from Mr. Thompson this morning. I heard him swallow hard. In your petition to revisit the divorce settlement? I paused deliberately. The judge dismissed it again, permanently this time. His frustration exploded into outright rage. This isn't fair, Claire, he shouted. You set me up, you planned this entire thing behind my back. I couldn't help but smile. No, Derek, I said calmly. I just paid attention to the details. And with that final statement, I hung up. I expected that to be the last interaction I'd ever have with Derek. I was wrong. 2 days later, Megan was back at my doorstep, but this time everything about her was different. There was no smug grin, no condescending tone. She looked completely defeated. Her usually flawless makeup smudged, her perfectly styled blonde hair messy, like she hadn't had the energy to fix it. I folded my arms and leaned against the doorframe. Megan, I said neutrally, what do you want? She hesitated, shifting her weight, looking down before finally meeting my eyes. And then she did something I never expected. She apologized. I was stupid, she said, her voice cracking. I believed everything he told me. He said you were cold and controlling, that you didn't support him. She shook her head, letting out a bitter laugh. I thought I was different, that he wouldn't do to me what he did to you. I stayed quiet, letting her continue. But you were right about everything, she whispered, her eyes glistening. He used me, took all my money, maxed out my credit cards, and when I asked him to help with rent, he told me I was too much to handle, that I was holding him back. And just like that, Megan had become exactly what I had been a year ago. I exhaled slowly, studying her face, seeing my own pain reflected back. So what now? I asked carefully. You planning to run back to him? She laughed, shaking her head. No, I'm done. Completely done. She hesitated. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I watched her for a long moment, unsure if I had truly forgiven her, but understanding exactly where she was standing. I nodded slowly. Good luck, Megan, I said simply. She gave me a small, sad smile, and then she turned and walked away, finally ready to start rebuilding. That night, I sat in my living room with a glass of wine, reflecting on everything that had happened. I had thought revenge would feel different, that when Derek finally hit rock bottom, I'd feel some rush of victory. But the truth was simpler. I didn't feel anything for him anymore. I had won, not because I had destroyed him, but because I had moved on. Because I had built something entirely my own. Derek was still stuck in his same destructive patterns, and that wasn't my problem anymore. Mr. Thompson sent me one final update a week later. Derek had applied for a new credit card and been denied. He had tried to secure a personal loan and been rejected by every bank. He was drowning, and for once, I wasn't going to save him. I lifted my wine glass and whispered softly, "Good luck, Derek." And just like that, I closed the chapter on him forever. The following morning was crisp and quiet as I stepped into my boutique, the small shop Derek had once mocked. The bell chimed softly, and for the first time in years, I felt genuinely at peace. I had won not through shouting or bitter revenge, but simply by living well. I hadn't heard from Derek in weeks, and I assumed he had finally given up. But then one morning I saw it, a message from an unknown number. "Claire, I messed up. I know you hate me, but I need help. I lost my job and I have nowhere to go. Can we please just talk?" I stared at those words, waiting for some emotion to surface, but I felt absolutely nothing. I deleted the message without responding, and that was it. No more Derek, just my future. A week later, Megan walked into my boutique looking nervous, hesitating near the entrance. I folded my arms and waited. She took a deep breath and walked toward the counter. "I got a job," she said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" She nodded. "Marketing, it's not much, but it's completely mine." For the first time, Megan didn't look arrogant. She looked real, humbled, changed. I gave her a slow, approving nod. Good for you, I said. She let out a shaky laugh. Honestly, I don't know how you put up with him for 12 years. I smirked. I don't know either. She hesitated. I know I don't deserve it, but do you think maybe we could be friends someday? I thought about it carefully. Not friends, I said. Honestly, but maybe one day. That answer was enough. She nodded, bought a scarf, and walked out ready to start fresh. It was exactly 1 year later when I saw Derek again at a gas station, the most mundane setting for our final encounter. I had pulled in when I spotted him across the lot, standing beside a rusted sedan that looked like it was barely holding together. He looked so different. Thinner, exhausted, defeated. For just a brief moment, our eyes met, and in that single second, I knew exactly what he was thinking. She got everything, and I have nothing. But what Derek would never understand was that I hadn't won because I took things from him. I had won because I refused to let him take my future. I gave him a small nod, and then drove away without looking back, leaving him in my rearview mirror, growing smaller until he disappeared. That was the last time I ever saw Derek. Years passed, and my boutique expanded into 3 additional locations. I had built new friendships, discovered new passions, traveled to places I'd only dreamed about, and for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder. I kept a framed quote in my office, right above my desk, a simple reminder of everything I had survived. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's moving on and building something better. And that's exactly what I did. I moved forward, I built a life I was proud of, and I never looked back. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more compelling stories about strength, resilience, and moving forward.